The air in the Winterfell courtyard was sharp, with the promise of a long journey and a longer winter. Jon Snow swung his leg over his horse, the black wool of his new clothes a stark shadow against the gray stone. He was a brother of the Night's Watch now. Or would be, soon enough. He saw his father watching him from the base of the broken tower, his expression unreadable as a winter sky. Lord Eddard Stark walked towards him, his boots crunching softly on the hard-packed earth. The usual pleasantries, the final goodbyes, had already been said inside, in the warmth of the Great Hall. This was something else. "You're a Stark," Ned said, his voice low, meant only for Jon. "You may not have my name, but you have my blood." It was the closest his father had ever come to a true comfort. Jon nodded, his throat tight. "I know." "The next time we see each other," Ned began, the familiar, painful promise hanging in the air. "We'll talk about your mother, I promise." Jon had heard it before, a promise for a future that never seemed to arrive. He looked down at his gloved hands, at the worn leather of the reins. For once, he felt the sting of it more than the hope. "You always say that." Ned's gaze faltered. He looked past Jon, towards the distant line of the wall, a place he was sending a boy he loved to disappear. He saw Robert's approaching party in his mind's eye, a wave of stag banners and southern ambitions that would soon crash upon Winterfell. He saw Lyanna's face, pale and bloodied in a bed of winter roses, her last words a desperate whisper. "Promise me, Ned." He had kept that promise for 14 years, a secret locked so deep within him it had become a part of his bones. But looking at Jon now, a man grown, riding to a life of exile and frozen anonymity, the promise felt like a betrayal. What if there was no next time? What if Robert's arrival was the end of everything? The weight of it all settled on him in an instant. "Jon," Ned said, his voice cracking with a sudden, terrible urgency. He reached out and gripped Jon's arm, his fingers tight. "Get down from the horse." Confused, Jon hesitated. Benjen was waiting. The convoy was ready. "Father?" "Get down," Ned repeated, his eyes flinty. It was not a request. Jon dismounted, his heart beginning to pound a strange, uncertain rhythm. Ned led him away from the horses, away from the prying eyes of guards and stable hands, into the deep shadows of the first keep's archway. The air was cold and still. "What you said is true," Ned began, his voice a strained whisper. "I have my blood, but you who undo not." The words made no sense. Jon stared at him, a frown creasing his brow. "What are you talking about? You just said—" "I lied," Ned cut in, the admission tearing from him like a shard of glass. "I've lied to you your entire life, to Robert, to my wife, to everyone." He looked at Jon, his gray eyes filled with a grief so profound it seemed to swallow the light. "You are not my son." Jon felt the world tilt on its axis. The stone wall at his back was suddenly the only thing holding him upright. He felt a cold dread creep up his spine, a feeling far worse than the simple shame of being a bastard. If he wasn't Ned Stark's son, then who was he? What was he? I don't understand." "Your mother," Ned said, forcing the words out, each one a stone he had carried for a lifetime, "was my sister, Lyanna." The name hit Jon with the force of a physical blow. Aunt Lyanna, the beautiful, wild, Stark girl from the stories, whose statue in the crypts he sometimes visited, wondering about the woman who had died so young. He tried to process it. He was his father's nephew? A different kind of bastard, then? The shame was still there, but now it was tangled with a deep, aching confusion. Why hide that? Why let Catelyn hate him for a sin that wasn't even Ned's? Her and who? Jon asked, his voice barely audible. Ned Stark took a deep, shuddering breath. He was breaking a sacred oath, perhaps damning them all, but he couldn't let the boy go into the dark without the truth. He owed Lyanna that much. He owed Jon that much. Her husband, Ned said softly. Your father was Rhaegar Targaryen. The name was a death sentence. Rhaegar Targaryen, the Dragon Prince, the monster who had abducted Lyanna and started a war. The man Robert Baratheon had hammered to death on the Trident. Jon felt sick. The world wasn't tilting anymore. It had fallen away completely, leaving him in a black, silent void. He was the son of a monster, the spawn of the dragon. No, Jon whispered, shaking his head. No, that's not. You're lying. Your name, Ned continued, his voice relentless, pressing the truth into Jon like a brand, is Aegon Targaryen. Lyanna married him in secret. She loved him, and she died giving birth to you, in a tower in Dorne. With her last breath, she made me promise to protect you. She knew what Robert would do if he ever found out. Everything clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Robert's hatred of Targaryens, the lie Ned had lived, Catelyn's coldness, not just for a bastard, but for the living proof of a secret that could get them all killed. He wasn't Jon Snow, bastard of Winterfell. He was Aegon Targaryen, the last dragon, the true heir to the Iron Throne. And his entire life had been a cage built to hide him. He looked at Ned, his father, his uncle, his jailer. The respect and love he had always felt was now warring with a profound sense of betrayal. You let me think I was nothing. I let you live, Ned corrected him, his expression one of pure agony. To Robert, you are not a boy. You are a threat, a reason to burn this castle to the ground with everyone in it. I gave you my sister's look, the Stark look, and I prayed it would be enough. I buried your name so you could draw breath. The weight of it was crushing. A crown he never wanted. A name that would see him hunted and killed. He stumbled back against the wall, the stones cold and unforgiving. What am I supposed to do with this? He choked out. What do you want from me? I want you to go to the wall, Ned said, his voice regaining some of its familiar strength. The plan does not change. It is the one place a man can disappear. The one place his name doesn't matter. You must go. You must swear the oath. Renounce all titles and claims. The oath is a lie, then, Jon said, bitterness lacing his words. Another lie. It is survival, Ned insisted. Learn to fight. Learn to command. Be honorable. Be just. Be the man I raised you to be. But never, ever tell anyone who you are. Let Jon Snow die on that wall, if he must. But you, Aegon, must live. Do you understand me? Jon looked into Ned's eyes and saw not a lord, but a desperate man trying to hold back the tide with his bare hands. He was no longer a boy seeking his place in the world. He was a secret, a weapon, a ghost. He straightened up, the shock slowly hardening into a cold, grim resolve. He was still going to the wall, but he wasn't going to find a home. He was going to bide his time. He was going into hiding. He nodded slowly. I understand. As he rode out of the gates of Winterfell, with Benjen Stark at his side and Ghost padding silently behind his horse, he did not look back. He was leaving behind a life that had never been his, to begin a watch for a kingdom he was supposed to rule. The name Aegon Targaryen burned in his mind, a secret fire that warmed him against the coming cold. The journey north was a silent, brooding affair. Benjen Stark, ever watchful, noticed the change in his nephew. The boy who had left Winterfell was eager, if melancholic. This new Jon was quiet, his eyes distant, as if he were listening to a conversation no one else could hear. One night, as they made camp south of the Gift, Benjen found Jon staring into the fire, his hand resting on Ghost's white fur. "You're quiet," Benjen observed, passing him a skin of ale. Jon took it without a word. He looked at his uncle, the first ranger, the man who had forsaken family for the watch. He saw Ned in his eyes. He wondered if Benjen knew, if he was part of the conspiracy of silence that had defined his life. "I have a lot on my mind." "The wall gives a man time to think," Benjen said. "Too much, sometimes." He paused, studying Jon's face in the flickering firelight. "Your father," he seemed troubled when we left, more than usual. The question hung in the air. Did he tell you? Jon knew in that moment that Benjen didn't know. Ned had carried this burden entirely alone. The thought was staggering. For 14 years, Lord Stark had walked a razor's edge, and no one had been there to catch him if he fell. "He told me about my mother," Jon said, testing the waters, watching Benjen's reaction. Benjen's expression softened with sympathy. "Ah, he finally told you her name?" "He told me everything," Jon replied, his voice flat. He saw the confusion in Benjen's eyes and knew he could go no further. The secret was his now, a second skin he would have to wear for the rest of his life. At Castle Black, the reality of his new existence set in. The squalor, the cold, the collection of thieves and rapists who were now his brothers. The old Jon Snow would have been intimidated, desperate to prove his worth. The new Jon Aegon was an observer. He saw everything through a different lens. Alliser Thorne's taunts were not personal insults. They were the pathetic ramblings of a bitter man who had chosen the wrong side in a war his father had won. The petty squabbles in the training yard were not threats. They were lessons in power, in how men tested one another. He excelled, of course. His training at Winterfell made him superior to every other recruit. But where the old Jon might have shown arrogance, this Jon showed restraint. He understood that true leadership wasn't about being the best swordsman. It was about earning loyalty. He took Pip and Gren under his wing, not out of pity, but as a calculated act of alliance building. He defended Samwell Tarly not just from kindness, but because he recognized the value of a keen mind and a loyal heart. He was building his own court in the frozen wasteland at the end of the world. Jeor Mormont, the old bear, saw it. He saw a boy with the eyes of a king. He saw a natural leader, quiet and watchful, who commanded respect without demanding it. He saw the Stark in him, but there was something else too. A fire, a hidden intensity that set him apart. That was why he chose Jon as his steward. He wanted to keep him close, to mold him. He had no idea he was grooming a monarch for a throne he didn't even know was empty. One evening, in the Lord Commander's solar, Mormont was reading a letter from the south. His brow was furrowed. "Your father, Lord Stark, has been named Hand of the King." Jon felt a jolt of fear. Ned, in King's Landing? In the Viper's Nest, with Robert and the Lannisters. It was the most dangerous place in the world for a man holding his secret. "Is that wise?" Jon asked, his voice carefully neutral. Mormont grunted. "Wisdom and honor don't always walk the same path. Your father is an honorable man. King's Landing is not an honorable place." The old bear looked at Jon, his gaze sharp. "He's taken your sisters with him. left your brother Robb in charge at Winterfell. The world is changing, lad. I can feel it in my old bones." Jon felt it too. He was a prisoner of his own volition, bound by an oath he'd taken to protect a secret that was also a claim. As news trickled north of Catelyn Stark taking the imp prisoner, of Ned's arrest for treason, of King Robert's death, Jon's world began to shrink. The wall was no longer a refuge, it was a cage. He read the letter from Robb, calling the banners, marching south. He should be there. He should be fighting alongside his brother, his cousin. The night he decided to desert, the conflict within him was a raging storm. Jon Snow, the brother of the Night's Watch, was bound by his oath. But Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar, owed his loyalty to the family that had saved him. He saddled his horse in the dead of night, ghost a silent shadow at his side, his mind set on riding south to join Robb's army. But Sam, Pip, and Gren were waiting for him at the gate. They stood before him, a wall of friendship and loyalty. "Don't go, Jon," Sam pleaded. "They'll kill you for it." "My father is dead," Jon said, his voice raw with a grief he couldn't fully show. "My brother is marching to war." "The Night's Watch is your brother now," Gren insisted. "We're your family." It was Sam's final words that stopped him. "Your father was Lord Commander Stark to you, but to us, he was Eddard Stark, the man who sent us here. He believed in the Watch. Is this how you honor him?" He looked at their faces, and he didn't just see his friends. He saw the faces of the men he would one day have to lead. He saw the kingdom he was meant to protect. And he realized Ned's final lesson. A king does not abandon his post. He serves his people, no matter the cost. He was Lord Commander Mormont's steward. His place was here. For now. He turned his horse around and walked back into the castle, the decision settling in his heart like a stone. He would honor Ned, not by riding to a war for the South, but by holding the North. He would keep his watch. The great ranging beyond the wall was Jon's true crucible. Under the old bear's command, he saw the real enemy. Not Lannisters or Baratheons, but the ancient, cold things that stirred in the haunted forest. At Craster's Keep, he saw the horror of the other's bargains. When he was forced to kill Qhorin Halfhand, he understood the true meaning of sacrifice. And when he went among the wildlings, he saw not savages, but a people desperate to survive. With Ygritte, he felt a flicker of a life he could have had. A simple, free life. But the name Aegon Targaryen was always there, a ghost between them. He loved her, but he knew he could never be just Jon Snow, not even for her. His duty was larger, colder. When he finally escaped and returned to Castle Black, wounded and heartbroken, he brought with him a crucial piece of knowledge. Mance Rayder wasn't building an army to attack the Seven Kingdoms. He was building an ark to save his people from the White Walkers. The defense of Castle Black was where Jon Snow, the bastard, died, and a commander was born. With Mormont dead and Thorne a blustering fool, Jon took charge. He organized the defenses, placed men where they were needed, and fought on the battlements with the fury of a man who had nothing left to lose. He held the wall against Mance Rayder's army, 100,000 strong, with only a handful of black brothers. He earned their respect not with his name, but with his courage. Then came Stannis. His charge broke the wildling army, his knights a storm of steel and fire. In the aftermath, Stannis Baratheon, the would-be king, offered Jon the one thing he had always wanted: a name. He would legitimize him, make him Jon Stark, Lord of Winterfell, if Jon would bend the knee and help him win the North. The old Jon would have wept with gratitude. He would have accepted in a heartbeat. But Jon looked at Stannis, at his hard, unforgiving eyes, and his burning belief in his own righteousness, and he saw another Robert, a man who would burn the world to sit on a throne, and he knew he could never serve him. Inside, he thought, "You are offering to make a wolf the lord of his own castle, when I am the dragon who owns the continent." "I cannot," Jon said, his voice steady. "I swore an oath to the Night's Watch. I will not break it." He then did something even bolder. He offered Stannis an alliance, not as a subordinate, but as an equal. "I will not kneel, your grace, but the North is held by the Boltons, who betrayed my brother. The wildlings you've captured are not your enemy. The Night King is. Give me the wildlings. Let them pass through the wall and settle in the gift. In return, they will fight for the living. They will fight for the North. And a loyal North will be a far greater asset to you than a resentful one ruled by a turncloak." Stannis was taken aback by his audacity. Melisandre, however, stared at Jon, her red eyes seeing something more than just a bastard boy. She saw king's blood. She saw a power she did not understand. "There is a light in you, Jon Snow," she whispered later. "A destiny." Jon was elected Lord Commander. His first act was to bring the wildlings south of the Wall, an act that saved them and earned their loyalty, but sealed his fate with the traditionalists in the Watch. Bowen Marsh and the others saw it as a betrayal. They saw a boy who favored savages over his sworn brothers. They did not see the Lord Commander making the hard choice, the king saving his people. Meanwhile, in the south, the war had taken a darker turn. With Ned gone, Robb Stark had proven a brilliant tactician, but a flawed strategist. He had won every battle, but his marriage to Jane Westerling had broken his alliance with the Freys. Catelyn, mad with grief over her sons, had released Jaime Lannister in a desperate, foolish bid to get her daughters back. The Karstarks had abandoned him. His cause was crumbling, but Ned's secret had not died with him. Before his execution, he had been granted a final visit from his wife, a courtesy arranged by Varys. In that dark, desperate meeting in the dungeons of the Red Keep, Ned had told Catelyn everything. He confessed his lie, explained Lyanna's secret marriage, and revealed Jon's true name. He begged her to protect him, to guide Robb, to understand that the game was bigger than the war against the Lannisters. The revelation shattered Catelyn. The boy she had despised for years was not a mark of her husband's infidelity, but the living embodiment of his profound, heartbreaking honor. He was her nephew. He was the son of the sister she had loved. And he was the rightful king. That knowledge transformed her grief into a cold, diamond-hard purpose. She returned to Robb's camp a different woman. She no longer pushed for rash, emotional decisions. She became his most cunning advisor. She counseled him against the marriage to Jane, but when the deed was done, she worked tirelessly to mend the rift with the Freys, offering them concessions, using every ounce of her Tully ingenuity. She convinced Robb that Jaime Lannister was not a bargaining chip for Sansa and Arya, but the single most valuable hostage in the world. A key to checkmating Tywin Lannister, and, perhaps, a tool to forge an alliance with the one person who could unite the realm against the others: Jon. It was she who conceived of the new strategy. The war with the Lannisters was a stalemate. The real war was coming from the North. The North could not win alone. It needed a king the entire realm might one day follow. At a war council in Riverrun, After the news of Balon Greyjoy's death and the loss of the Iron Islands, Robb Stark, weary of war and burdened by a crown he never wanted, stood before his bannermen. Catelyn stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "My lords," Robb began, his voice echoing in the great hall, "I have lost the North. My brothers are dead, my sisters are hostages. I have won every battle, yet I am losing this war." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "But a new path has been revealed to me, a path to a victory greater than any of us imagined." He unrolled a scroll, a declaration written in his own hand. "For 14 years, my father, Eddard Stark, kept a secret to protect the realm, a secret he shared with my mother before his death. The boy we knew as my half-brother, Jon Snow, is not my father's son." A murmur went through the hall. Great Jon Umber gripped the hilt of his sword. "He is the son of my aunt, Lyanna Stark," Robb continued, his voice rising, "and her true and lawful husband, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen." The hall erupted. Shouts of disbelief, of anger, of confusion. A Targaryen? The son of the dragon who had started the whole bloody war? Catelyn raised a hand for silence. "It is the truth. Lord Stark's honor was never stained. It was forged in the fires of a promise to his dying sister. Jon Snow is Aegon Targaryen, the sixth of his name, the rightful heir to the Iron Throne." Robb let the shockwaves pass. Then he delivered the final, world-altering blow. "I, Robb Stark, king in the North, do hereby declare my fealty to my cousin, Aegon Targaryen. I renounce my crown and name him my heir. He is the true king in the North. He is the king of the Andals and the First Men. We are not fighting to break the Seven Kingdoms. We are fighting to restore them under the rule of a true king, a king of both Stark and Targaryen blood." He drew his sword and knelt, laying it on the floor. "For the White Wolf!" he cried. "The king in the North!" One by one, the stunned northern lords, moved by Robb's conviction and their unwavering loyalty to the Starks, drew their own swords and knelt. The Great Jon, Maege Mormont, Jason Mallister. They had declared for a Stark. Now they would fight for a Stark's chosen king. A raven flew north, carrying Robb's declaration. It arrived at Castle Black on the same day Jon received a letter from Ramsay Bolton, a vile, boastful message proclaiming Stannis' defeat and demanding the return of his bride, Arya Stark. Jon stood in his solar, the two parchments in his hands representing two futures. One was a path of blackmail and fear, a war against the monstrous Boltons. The other was a path of destiny and fire, a war for the entire realm. He read Robb's letter again, his hands trembling. He knows, and he's given it all for me. The love and sacrifice in that gesture was more real than any Iron Throne. Bowen Marsh and the other conspirators chose that moment to strike. They saw a Lord Commander distracted, reading letters from the south, planning to ride to war against the Boltons for his false sister. They saw an oathbreaker. "For the Watch," they snarled, and plunged their daggers into him. Jon fell to his knees in the snow, the cold seeping into him, the betrayal a final, bitter sting. He looked up at the sky, at the stars, and his last thought was not of the Iron Throne or a dragon's crown, but of the crypts of Winterfell and the promise of a father he now fully understood. He died as Jon Snow. But Melisandre had seen his fire in her flames. She had seen him fighting on the walls of Winterfell, banners of a three-headed dragon snapping in the wind behind him. Guided by the Lord of Light, she performed the ritual. She washed his body, cut his hair, and begged her God for his return. He awoke with a gasp, the air burning in his lungs. The wounds were still there, but the life had returned to him. He was not the same. The quiet, brooding boy was gone. The cold certainty of a king had taken his place. He had paid the ultimate price for his service to the Watch. His watch was ended. He executed his assassins himself, his face a mask of grim justice. Then he gathered the free folk and the loyal brothers of the Night's Watch in the courtyard. "My name," he announced, his voice carrying across the silent yard, "is Aegon Targaryen. I am the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. My cousin, Robb Stark, has named me king in the north. The Boltons hold my ancestral home. They have murdered my family. I am going to take back Winterfell. I am going to unite the north. And then I am going to save it from the Night King. Who will stand with me?" A roar went up from the wildlings, Tormund Giantsbane's voice the loudest of all. The Black Brothers, stunned but awed by his resurrection and his revelation, drew their swords. He was their Lord Commander, reborn as a king. The battle against the Bolton army was not the desperate, frantic scramble it had been in another life. Jon, Aegon, was a different commander. He was patient, calculating, using his knowledge of the land and the loyalty of the free folk to his advantage. He had the fealty of the northern houses, galvanized by Robb's decree and the news of a Stark heir returning to claim his own. He was not just a bastard trying to save his brother. He was a king reclaiming his kingdom. He met Ramsay on the field before Winterfell. The fight was brutal, but the outcome was never in doubt. Aegon's forces, a mix of northern steel, wildling fury, and the grim determination of the Night's Watch, crashed against the Bolton lines. He fought his way to Ramsay, his Valyrian steel sword, Longclaw, a blur of motion. He beat him senseless, not with the wild rage of a wronged brother, but with the cold, focused fury of a king dispensing justice. He raised the Stark banner over the ramparts of Winterfell himself. The North was his. The lords who had been hesitant before now flocked to his side. He sat in the Great Hall, in the seat of his ancestors, with Sansa, whom he had rescued, at his side. He was the White Wolf, the Targaryen king, the hope of the North. But his victory was bittersweet. He was a king of ashes and ghosts. Robb was dead, betrayed at a wedding that his mother's new knowledge could not prevent, as the plot was already too deep. Catelyn, too, was gone. His true father and mother were long dead. He was alone, burdened with a crown he had never asked for, and a war that was far from over. From the east, word was coming. Another Targaryen. A queen with 3 dragons and an army of Unsullied and Dothraki was sailing for Westeros to claim her birthright. His aunt, Daenerys Targaryen, believed herself to be the last of her line. She was coming to take a throne that was his by law, but hers by fire and blood. And beyond the wall, the true enemy waited, patient and silent. The Night King and his army of the dead cared nothing for thrones or names. Winter had come, and the king in the north, Aegon Targaryen, knew that his war had only just begun. The secret was out, the crown was claimed, but the world was more dangerous than ever. So here we stand, at the edge of a new chapter. A world where the truth came out not at the end, but at the beginning. It gave our hero a name and a purpose, but it cost him his youth and his peace. It united the North, but it has set him on a collision course with his own blood. And it leaves us with the question: what happens when the Dragon Queen meets the White Wolf? When fire meets ice? Not as a prophecy, but as a contest for a throne, with the fate of the living hanging in the balance. We've walked this path together, and now I'll leave you with that. The story isn't over, it's just getting started.